Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to pull back the curtain on something that affects, well, pretty much all of us: compensation. How does a company actually decide what a job is worth?
I mean, have you ever wondered if your paycheck is just a guess? For so many people, it really feels like salaries are decided in this total black box. Maybe it's based on luck, your negotiation skills, or maybe even who you know. Is there any logic to it at all?
And let's be honest, that definitely happens. But, while that approach does exist, a lot of organizations are actually using a much more deliberate, more strategic process to figure all this out. Okay, so let's dive into this systematic approach. And the first thing you really got to wrap your head around is this key shift in thinking. This method isn't about evaluating the person in the job, but the value of the job itself.
So this whole process, it's often called strategic salary evaluation. And the whole idea really is to strip away as much of the subjective stuff, personal feelings, as possible. Instead, it relies on a consistent, objective framework to understand a role's value to the company.
All right, so how does this actually work in practice? How do you turn a job description into a cold, hard number? Well, it turns out it's a pretty clear multi-step process.
Yeah, the whole thing really just boils down to 3 logical steps. First, the company has to sit down and define what it actually values. What skills, what responsibilities are most critical for them. Then, they use that as a yardstick to measure every single job. And finally, you just add up the points to get a clear score.
Okay, so these criteria, they're basically the building blocks for this entire system. A company might look at things like, okay, what's the level of financial responsibility? Does the role involve managing a team? How much training is required? Is there any physical hardship? And believe it or not, some companies use as many as 18 different criteria to get the full picture.
But, and this is crucial, it's not just a simple checklist. Here's where it gets really interesting. Each of these criteria is weighted. Basically, the company decides, hey, this factor is way more important to our success than that one, so it gets a lot more points. So, let's see how this plays out in practice. Take a project manager role, for example. A high level of financial responsibility, boom, that could net you 250 points. Managing a team, also super important, so that's another 200 points. But physical hardship, well, for this particular role, it's low, so it only adds, 15 points to the total score? You can see how the weighting makes a huge difference. Okay, so now every job in the company has a score, a number. But what do you actually do with that number? Well, the next step, logically, is to translate those points into an actual paycheck.
Right, so after adding up the scores from all those different criteria, let's say our project manager role, it lands at a grand total of 465 points. So what now?
Well, the company doesn't just pull a salary out of thin air. It has these predefined salary classes or bands that are tied directly to these point ranges. This creates a really clear, transparent structure for the whole organization. If a role scores between 100 and 200 points, it's in class 1, and so on, all the way up the scale. So with that score of 465, our project manager lands squarely in salary class 4. And the key here really is consistency. It means the role itself has a defined value, and anyone who steps into that role is going to be compensated within that same predictable range. And this is where you can really see the power of this. You can see the huge contrast between a structured, thoughtful approach like this one and one that's, just based on a gut feeling or who you had lunch with last week.
This just lays it all out, doesn't it? You're moving away from a system that's subjective, totally opaque, based on who you know, which, let's be honest, just creates inequality. And you're moving toward a strategic method that's objective, transparent, and is actually designed to manage fairness based on what a job is truly worth to the company.
And that really is the key takeaway here. It's like this quote says, when you manage compensation this way, it shows you're actually managing. There's real thought, real reflection behind it. It stops being just a transaction and becomes this powerful strategic tool for the business. So after all this, it kind of leaves us with one last big question to think about, right? Is salary just another expense on a spreadsheet to be managed? Or is it a strategy to be deployed? A tool you use to attract, to keep, and to motivate the exact people you need in the exact right roles?